Hi friends, today I have some more recent DNFs. I think at this point there's no long intro necessary anymore. I just try to kind of wrap up my DNFs every 5 DNFs, and so it's time for another one. Let's go. So first I have Odd One Out by Nick Stone. I DNF'd this about 52% into the audiobook. I get why it gets a lot of mixed reactions from people. I think that this book does a lot of things right and a lot of things wrong. I felt very uncomfortable throughout the first part. It's kind of split into 3 parts where it's like from the perspective of the 3 main characters, and it's not like it's alternating chapters. It's like one part from the one character, then another part from the other character, and then at the end the final character. And I just did not feel very comfortable with reading from the dude's perspective. And I'm not necessarily saying that as like a thing that I would in general criticize. I just felt uncomfortable. He knows his best friend is gay, and still he like constantly hits on her and constantly has these thoughts. And I know how the story kind of develops and stuff, but just reading from his perspective, the way he felt about her and what he thought about her and I just didn't want to deal with it. I just already felt not great about it, but then I was like, I just have to get through this first part and then I'll be done with the dude's perspective. And I just really, I don't know, I felt like this book could have been something that's really relatable because I know the characters are like super flawed. I just ended up being annoyed more than anything. I definitely think that this book has a lot of, as I said, a lot of good things in there as well, but I also just think that it's a big old mess, and I simply ended up finding it almost exhausting to read from the characters' perspectives, and so I just decided to DNF it because I was not having a good time in any capacity. But as I said, I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with this novel. I think that it just portrays very flawed characters. I just felt uncomfortable and annoyed and exhausted. Then I DNF'd Again But Better by Christine Riccio. There is a couple of reasons why I DNF'd this. I DNF'd this only 52 pages into it, but I did kind of skip to a part that Melanie told me to skip to, which, by the way, I got this physical arc from her, and I just want to make it very clear that I cherished this arc so much, even though I didn't finish the book. And it's signed, it means a whole lot to me, and I will like love it forever, even though I didn't end up finishing the book. And like that's honestly almost like already one reason why I didn't finish the book, because I was kind of just like, I don't want too many negative feelings to be kind of attached to this book. But yeah, what I was trying to say is that I kind of skim read a couple of chapters around a part where Melanie told me to read, and then I also read the epilogue. And at that point I was already like, okay, I'm gonna DNF it. That's also why I didn't care to kind of skip ahead. But then reading this middle part and then the epilogue 100% confirmed that I made the absolute right decision to DNF it. I mean, there's honestly just a lot of things not good about this book, and I kind of didn't want to finish it and then have to like drag it, because I like Christine. I genuinely like Christine. She's one of the first people that I watched on BookTube, and she made me fall in love with the Mortal Instruments, and I really appreciate her. So I don't really want to drag this book, but it was just really not good. The writing was not good at all, and like the character is in her 20s, and even in a later part we also read from her in her late 20s, and it just reads like really juvenile YA fiction, and I found it so sad. Like it was almost like a missed opportunity, because this character is like very awkward. She has not made a lot of experiences relationship wise. She's kind of a loner, and so I think that this could be a book that would be incredibly relatable for a lot of people. But because the writing style feels so juvenile, the character just comes across as annoying. I don't know how to describe it, but just the way she was written, I don't think did this character any favors. And then also there's so many aspects in this novel. Like at first you think it's like fun gimmicks, like the username of the main character being a twist on Poland Bananas 20, little things like that. You kind of think like, oh, like that's fun, but then at some point you realize that this main character is Christine, And that's when I just started to feel uncomfortable. Like, it's one thing to like have like a self-insert, but it's another thing to make your readers feel uncomfortable, because as a reader you kind of feel like you're intruding and you're like reading things that you shouldn't really be reading about. Like, I just kept thinking like which of her feelings and thoughts were inspired by her own life, and I just felt uncomfortable because I just couldn't shut that part of my brain off because so many other things were so close to her. And so I just did not have a good time while reading this. And then in general, just knowing the end, just knowing where it goes, I'm just like, nah, no. Then I DNF'd When the Curtain Falls by Carrie Hope Fletcher at 137 pages into it. Okay, the funny thing about this one, just let me start with this. This is another self-insert. If you don't know Carrie Hope Fletcher, which I'm guessing there's probably a much smaller chunk of my audience that knows Carrie than knowing Christine, but I have been following Carrie for a super, super long time. And so I think I know her well, as in I know the things that she shares online, I probably know them because I've been following her for such a long time. This is another story that just made me feel deeply uncomfortable. It's not only just like, oh, this character literally is Carrie, but it also feels like, first off, she is kind of throwing in all these PSAs that she talks about on social media all the time about, like, you know, how hard it can be to be like a woman in the public, and like how hard it is to kind of deal with stuff on social media. And she talks about this quite a lot, but in this novel, the way she does it just feels annoying because, first of all, you like know that everything she says is exactly like what Carrie would say. You're just kind of reading it and you're like, ugh. And it feels so like fake woke. It feels like it's trying to like send a message, like, you know, like bullying people on social media is not okay, which obviously I agree with, but it's just done in a way where it doesn't feel like she's actually trying to teach people, but she's just trying to be like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm having a really, really hard time describing it. But it's just really fucking annoying and irritating because there's just so many things in there that I know come from her as a person and the things that annoy her. And like, obviously, books often will be inspired by real life experiences, but it's just another one where it just ends up being so much. And then the things that the main character doesn't kind of talk about then get like talked about from the love interest's point of view. So I just feel like she had these two characters in there basically just to be like, so these are the things that I hate about like the internet and life as an actress, and I'm just throwing them at you by my characters saying these things. So that was annoying. And then just the fact that the main character starts dating her coworker, and this was written kind of shortly after Carrie had started dating her coworker. And then the things you read about and the issues they have in their relationship, again, I was just starting to wonder which of these aspects are inspired by real life, because so many aspects are clearly inspired by her life because she talks about them so much on social media. And so you're just kind of like reading this relationship and you're like, did they have the same issues? Like, were they going through this stuff as well? Did they have that experience? And it just feels intrusive. I feel like I am stalking this person. I don't like it. On top of that, the conflicts that the characters had were really fucking stupid because her love interest like made very clear from the beginning what kind of relationship he would want to be in, and like he said, like, I'm just telling you quite honestly, and if that's not okay with you, then I don't think it's gonna work out. And she's like, no, like, it's fine, we're gonna make it work. And then just in the first like 137 pages that I read, they get in fights, I think 4 times about that exact issue. And like, okay, having like a conflict about it once, her being like, this is just not how I want to kind of be in this relationship, it's just not going to work out. Okay, fine. But it ends up being like him being like, I'm sorry, but I told you, like, this is how it was going to go. And then she's like, I can't deal with this. And then she runs out of the room, they make up, and then literally 3 days later the exact same thing happens. And I'm just like, how the fuck? Especially because I feel like she was trying so hard to be like, you have to hate the love interest, when from the beginning he made these things about the relationship clear. oh my god, this book, I'm realizing how mad it made me, and so I just no longer wanted to waste any time on it. I know there's a better part where it kind of has some flashbacks about the past, and I was really intrigued because the prologue was so cool, and I wanted to kind of get to that point where the storylines come together. I couldn't get there. Then I DNF'd Sherwood by Megan Spooner. I DNF'd this about 31% into it. I had started the ebook couple of weeks ago and had a really hard time getting into it, and then when the book eventually came out, because I did have an arc of it, I decided to listen to the audiobook. I thought maybe that would make it a little bit easier for me to get into the story, but no, I couldn't get into the story. I am honestly really disappointed by it. That's really what I realized once I actually sat down to write a couple of things about why I DNF'd it. I realized that maybe my main kind of point why I DNF'd it was simply because I was bored and I didn't really feel any connection to the characters whatsoever. But then kind of thinking more about it, I realized that this is sold as a female Robin Hood. And if you read the synopsis, it's clear Robin Hood dies and Marian is kind of becoming the new Robin Hood. And I thought that's what it was gonna be. I thought she was kind of gonna take over and she was gonna be this amazing woman in this position, when she ends up just dressing up as Robin. So I was kind of this is a retelling. You could give this woman so much power as a woman, and instead she has to dress up as a man. And I just think we're over that point. We don't need retellings like that. That's just boring. You know what I mean? It's a retelling. It's a fantasy story. A woman can have power and things to say, and I could very well imagine that the story would eventually lead there. I'm not saying that that's not what's gonna happen eventually, but the fact that it just starts out like that, where she has to dress up as a guy to I'm sick of it, just leave me alone. And then finally, I DNF'd The Warrior Heir by Cinda Williams-Chimer on page 93. I was not expecting the story that I got. I'm gonna tell you quite honestly, this cover somehow led me to believe that this is a medieval fantasy. And I know it's my own fault, it's absolutely my own fault for not reading the synopsis, but I had heard so many good things about it, and it's just an OG YA fantasy series, and I just thought it was gonna be one of the medieval fantasy series, and it was not. It's actually urban fantasy, and for some reason, and that's definitely something that I completely made up, but for some reason I thought that it was also a female main character. So when I read that it was a male character in an urban fantasy setting, I was oh. So basically, the first couple of pages are kind of a flashback, but then when does it start? When do we go to recent times? Let me see. Page 12. On page 12, I basically already knew that this book would probably not be for me, but I thought it was kind of rude not to give it a chance just because it's not what I expected. Because it's not I hate urban fantasy. It's not my favorite to read, but I was ready to give it a try, and I mean 90 pages, over 90 pages, my friends. That's a lot for me, but I did not enjoy it whatsoever. I was not interested, intrigued, nothing. I didn't care. That was kind of a disappointment. If you have not seen my series to marathon in 2019 video, this was on it, a 5-book series. I think I'm probably just gonna replace this series with the Demon King series if I can get the first book in the next couple of months, because I think that one is actually medieval fantasy, but I am gonna make sure, or high fantasy at least. I am actually gonna make sure that I read the synopsis for that one before I buy it. I don't know, man. I'm really, really sad because in my mind, this story was a story that I already gave 5 stars. I thought it was like a Graceling or a poison study. I was so wrong. I don't know why I thought that. It was literally so different from that. It's so funny. It's so funny to me. This is my own fault, but also it was not good, so yeah, these are my 5 most recent DNFs. An interesting kind of array of books, I feel like. Yeah, let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. Do you agree with the things that I said? And yeah, I make new videos every Wednesday and Sunday with occasional reviews on Friday. So click subscribe to never miss anything and hit the little bell so you get notified as well. And thank you so much for watching. I guess I'll see you soon. Bye!